Give you all more copies of the agenda.
I'm calling the meeting to order at 6:01. And we have on the agenda a request for remote participation by trustee Aiello, but we're going to go right past that because she is not here. Karen, would you like to take roll call?
Trustee Fernandez? Here.
I am here.
Trustee Ramirez?
And here. A quorum. With Julie not in attendance, though, we only have to do roll call vote for the okay, not for every item. All right. The next item is comments from the public. Oh, we passed that. That's on the closed session. Oh, I started at A, but we're actually reconvening to open session.
Yes.
But now we start to go to the Pledge of Allegiance.
Yes.
Pledge of Allegiance.
To the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice.
Next item is approval of the agenda. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Is there any public comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. Item I is input from the public regarding items not on the open session agenda. Is there anybody here who has something to comment that is not on an item on tonight's agenda? Now would be the time. Item J is the consent calendar. And I am going to ask that the updated minutes be pulled because they need a different type of motion. And I'm also going to ask that the total compensation systems contract be pulled just for some questions and clarification. Does anybody have any other items that they would like? What's up? Oh, is there a motion for?
I move that we approve all items except those pulled.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So I should mention, I apologize, the two items that we just approved, and I forgot to ask for public comment, were an MOU with SCO for adapted PE services and a contract with SCO Connect Consortium for telecom services. Were there any public comments on that? Okay, I apologize. Do I hear a motion to approve the amended minutes from the June 7th meeting? There were two typos on that with trustee Buckner's name was written trustee Lewis, and we corrected the spelling of Laura Schmidt's name. And so we approved those at our last meeting. Would somebody like to make a motion to amend the minutes to the revised ones?
I move that we amend the minutes from the 5/3/2023 meeting to those as updated currently.
Is there a second?
Second.
Are there any comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
If I can remind you guys to use your microphones on your first and your seconds for the benefit of the people at home. We do have people attending. Thank you.
Thank you.
And now, Andrew, I asked Superintendent Meredith about this total compensation systems. I do understand that we have retiree benefits, and that this is a contract to help with the administration of that. And I just thought that this would be a good opportunity to hear a little bit more detail about that process.
So since the district participates in other post-employment benefits, we're required per WSCUHSD 74-75 to conduct an annual actuarial study. So every 2 years, they do a full actuarial study, and then they do what's called a roll forward the second year. So we're entering into that full actuarial study for this next school year. And then it's used really for kind of our financial statements at the end of the year for our auditors. And that's part of the audit report. Doesn't really impact anything else, just kind of public acknowledgement of what the cost is for our pay-as-you-go post-employment benefit.
Does anybody else have questions about that? Thank you, Andrew. I will move approval of that contract.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Sorry, I'll second. Aye.
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 We are now.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah, just that one. Okay. Oh, and on the consent calendar, I'm sorry, I should just switch my glasses. I can't see you and my paper at the same time. I'm sorry, I'm gonna choose my paper. Now you're all blurry. Just to be clear, one of the other items on the consent calendar this evening that we did just approve was the declaration of surplus materials of the de-accessioned, which is a new word for me, library books that were removed from the library. And I just wanted to really commend Julie McClellan, because I know she's been working hard on that, and she's not here tonight, but that was a big, long list of books, and I'm sure it was hard to do that project. So now we're moving on to item K, which is the action on items heard in closed session. Louis?
So I would move that we approve the readmission of the student case number 5/21/22.
I'll second that. All those in favor, roll call vote. Karen? Yes.
Aye.
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 Any second.
So now we are moving on to education services on our agenda. And the first item we have tonight is a presentation from Gloria on our diversity, equity, and inclusion committee, progress of meetings.
One second.
I have to do this a couple different ways because I've extended my screen.
At home viewers, I'm working. The people at home, I'm working on getting yours up and available for you.
Yeah, I believe it's on.
Mhm.
Hello, my name is Gloria Mora, and I'm excited to be here with all of you today to provide an update on our Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee, who we are and what we've been up to. So first, some background. On January 18th, 2023, the board passed Resolution 9, establishing the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee. It was agreed on that this committee would be comprised of 13 people, including the superintendent, both high school principals, 2 certificated teachers, 1 classified staff member, and if we could go to the next slide, please. The Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion teacher on special assignment, or TOSA, 2 students, 2 educational partners, a representative from the English Learner Advisory Committee, a board liaison, and an alternate board liaison. So we started with our first meeting on March 30th with all 13 members in attendance, including an outside facilitator, Dr. Diane Namora from the Sonoma County Office of Education. It was important for us to start off with some outside facilitation. This first meeting was all about connecting and understanding our vibe to build trust amongst the group. It ended with us creating an ad hoc governance committee to create the committee governance, as we were very excited to get the ball rolling. Our second meeting was on April 11th, where we adopted the governance and started drafting our vision and mission statement to start working on our DEI plan. After this April meeting, our group had some reflections, and overall, we were all very excited to be doing this work, but had the desire to work faster. It felt like at the pace we were currently going at, we wouldn't have a plan by the beginning of the 23-24 school year, which led us to some pivots in April. So next slide, please. And those April pivots, the committee decided on a couple of things. First, we recognized that internal facilitation would lead us to work faster. If we can move one slide back, that would be awesome. Sorry. So 2 of our members, Katie Mammon and Nicole Wilkinson, worked together to put together a strategic plan survey. And I'd like to take a moment right here to acknowledge that we say the words strategic plan. And right now we have a plan. And it will become strategic at the end of revisions and when we prioritize our action items and they're all data driven. So I'd like to call that out right from the start. So basically Nicole and Katie sent out the survey and all of our members gave feedback on our draft mission and vision and then contributed the areas of growth and strength within our 6 key focus areas, which we'll get to in a moment. And this became our framework for our soon-to-be strategic plan. So in the spring, we had our 3rd meeting on May 9th with internal co-facilitation between Katie Mammon and Nicole Wilkinson. We broke into 6 focus area groups based on what we said we were most passionate about. We reviewed the survey data. So for example, I was on a data subcommittee along with Lewis, and we got to see what everyone said about data within our district. We then started crafting our strategic plan or section of it, and the group agreed on 3 things. First, we agreed that we would meet with our partners and finish our portion of the plan within the next week. We agreed that we would move our meetings from 1.5 hours to 3 hours, as the 1.5 hour time it felt rushed every meeting. And then we also decided that in May we would shop the plan around for our different affinity groups and integrate the feedback that we received. So that's what we did in May, and we returned in June for our 4th meeting, which was 3 hours of Forceful Campus, where we had check-ins and then as a group went line by line through this plan. And that brings us to today. So I'm here to provide you with an update and let you know that our next meeting will be sometime in August to continue our revisions and to onboard our new AMLE principal and identify a 2nd certificated teacher to join our group. So that sounds of interest to anyone in this room, please let Superintendent Meredith know, and we'd be happy to have you. So now I'm going to give you a little sneak peek of what we've been working on, starting with our mission and vision statements. So first, our vision is that all students have access to a relevant and meaningful education within a school community that celebrates and ensures the safety of and sense of belonging for all students and staff. Our mission, how we are going to get there, is by continually evaluating and enhancing our current systems and practices to ensure that all students graduate with fluency in each of the portrait of the graduate outcomes. Now, starting with systems and structures, what this looks like is each section has a goal statement, and then I pulled a few action items for this school year that we decided would help us on this mission. We can move to the next slide, please. Oh, and these are our 6 focus areas. They are discipline, systems and structures, academics and curriculum, data, staffing, and inclusive culture. Maybe wondering where we got these 6 focus areas. They came from 3 places, one being our West County Activist Club student demands, another being our DEI report given to us by our former DEI coordinator, and last was from districts similar to ours who had comprehensive DEI plans online that we were able to review. Next slide, please. And now we'll be moving into systems and structures. So our goal is to intentionally examine our current systems and structures for biases and to actively foster equity and inclusion. Action items for this are to hire a full-time DEI teacher on special assignment, which we've done, and Anita Sanguino was hired on June 16th. We're very excited to have her in this role. Second is to update our student handbook to include section on student rights. This came directly from our student activists. We're excited to update that. And then to develop strategies to increase awareness to low-income families about existing available resources. So for example, letting every single family know about the activity bus. Next slide, please. Moving on to staffing, and staffing really focuses on hiring and then also professional development. Our goal is through our hiring professional development practices to create a culturally competent and reflective community. Some example action items in our draft plan are to post professional development for all staff prior to the beginning of the school year, which includes training on diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging within school, to conduct empathy interviews with newly hired staff and staff of color to learn their gaps in our support structures, and to utilize the professional development time already provided within our contract day. So what this would look like is utilizing CPT time for cross-department collaboration and coaching for equity. Next slide, please. Looking at academics and curriculum, our goal was that our curriculum reflects the diversity of perspectives and that all students feel represented and appropriately challenged. What this looks like are teachers being supported during the contract hours to develop engaging curriculum, to develop strategies to disrupt academic and extracurricular silos, and also that teachers are supported through peer transformational coaching to integrate instructional strategies that engage all students. Moving on to data, our goal is that to best serve our students, we need to collect, review, and let our district data guide all of our decisions. Some example action items are to review all the data that we have and that we don't have and prioritize which data sets need to be further explored and even gathered, to determine whose job it is to maintain all of this data, and then to collect, digitize, and to aggregate data of staff and students to build trust among our educational partners. In discipline, our goal is to foster individual learning and positive school culture by reimagining our discipline to be restorative. Examples, items for this school year are to provide training to all staff regarding proactive restorative practices, to collaboratively rethink our discipline matrix to support students in embodying fluency within the POG outcomes, and to create a process to ensure that all staff has common expectations of all of our students. Last is inclusive culture, with our goal being that all staff and students experience a sense of belonging on our campuses. Action items would be to continue and improve Unity Week so that all students can attend any presentation they wish. To implement proactive restorative circles run by the DEI TOSA, which would be Anita, and then collaboratively rethink student programs to increase a sense of belonging for all students. So, for example, learning POG skills in settings like Tiger Transition and or tutorial. And with that, I'll leave you with a quote from the Australian Journal of Psychology. A sense of belonging, the subjective feeling of deep connection to social groups, physical places, and individual and collective experiences, is a fundamental human need that predicts numerous mental, physical, social, economic, and behavioral outcomes. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anybody have questions for Gloria? Oh.
But I gotta find the question.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I do have a question. Under the academics and curriculum item, the second action item is develop strategies to disrupt academic and extracurricular silos. Can you explain that?
Yes,
I don't
so
know what that means.
what we've determined is that students feel like they're on quote academic specs, right? So the kids who are taking AP classes or tend to be in the same classes with the same kids throughout their high school experience. And one thing we'd love to see happen on our campus to increase the inclusive culture and belonging and get to know one another is to purposely disrupt those groups that are always together. So an example would be taking personal business and finance and the farm to table class and collaborating on a project maybe where they have different farm to table businesses. So we're intermixing the different kids. They're learning how to collaborate, work together, and they have things in common.
Excellent, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else have a question? You know, this committee is an advisory committee, and I have to say that everything that you said, I am in full support of. I really, it all spoke really towards some positive changes that we can make here in our district. And I wonder, you know, some of the goals that you have, do you feel like you have the structure and you know, you can have these ideas. Do you feel like you have the integration to affect these things, to make them happen? For example, something that I was happy to see in there was the adding to the student handbook some information about the titles and how to, you know, what their rights are. And do you have the pathway forward to make that happen, or is that something that needs to still be proposed?
Yeah, thank you for that question. Right now, I don't see a clear, definite path for every single action item. That being said, the document is like 10 to 15 pages long, but I feel very confident that with this group of people and their know-how and where they sit within our school community, we are able to collaborate and figure out pathways forward for all of our action items. And that will come forward as we do the revision of our plan and start prioritizing.
Thank you. And the piece that looked sort of the most nebulous to me was the systems and structures, and how to identify needed changes within that. Do you have any, has there been any discussion on what kinds of steps might be taken towards identifying systems and structures that might need adjustment?
Yeah, so I think part of that is we're really sharing out this plan with our broader community and getting input from different perspectives and how we see our systems and structures and what our strengths are and what our areas of growth are. And so identifying places that need to be pivoted or shifted, I think we'll be able to easily identify it with collaboration between everybody.
And I think you mentioned that this would be under the purview of the TOSA, the DEI TOSA would be sort of holding that, is that?
The
Or
work's
did it-
actually spread throughout different positions, so we are being very mindful about what we can put on the DEI TOSA and what their capacity will be as they step into this new role. Many of the action items are spread across different people. So for example, some things are like under a crisis purview of hiring a DEI coordinator. And as we grow and revise this plan, we are looking to engage the community more and to be able to build out working groups. We're not there yet, but we really see our DEI committee as the start of everyone coming together to improve our school.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Does anyone from the public have any questions for Gloria? Thank you so much.
Awesome, thank you.
Thanks, Gloria.
Thanks, Gloria.
Great job, Gloria.
Next, we have consideration of approval of the 21-24 update to the local control accountability plan, the LCAP, and Superintendent Meredith, you are up.
Up lighting and multiple screens right now.
No worries.
So the audience,
at home, I'm just gonna drop the link in the chat for you. I apologize. I'll get this figured out hopefully soon.
do the slideshow for you guys. Move it over here.
So I'll start with the background. So obviously, we brought forward a draft of the LCAP for consideration and public input for public hearing on June 7th. We are in year 2, just completed year 2 of a 3-year cycle. And in the fall, we'll be beginning building our new 3-year plan, which we're really excited about, while also revising and updating metrics and closing out this 3-year plan. So that gives you a little bit of background. And one of the things I'll touch on today is we didn't make many revisions after public hearing. So we engage with our educational partners, with our DLAC committee, with ensuring that the public had an opportunity during public hearing to provide us their input, trustees provide us with their input. And as we get into the slides, I'll show you the few areas of adjustments that we did make and speak more to that. So this just gives you a little bit more of that background as I touched on. And so we're entering the year 3 of our 3-year contract, 3-year LCAP cycle. And we're actually really looking forward to building out what the new plan will look like, which I'll touch on in later slides. Next slide, please. So the LCAP must reflect California's 8 state priorities. So your basic services, your implementation of state standards, family engagement, pupil achievement, pupil engagement, school climate, course access, and other pupil outcomes. We were fortunate to have our new principal, by chance, to help facilitate our LCAP process, unknowingly that he would be joining the district. And we engaged not only with our educational partners on April 20th, but we also engaged specifically with our DLAC, and both Chuck Wade and Jessica Progolski helped me to facilitate those meetings. They were very productive, and we received some great input and interacted with our ed partners to determine what our priorities and what revisions we may make as we move forward. So those are some of the required LCAP metrics, and I won't read them to you, but they're just there for your reviews. And they're based on those priorities that we just looked at. You can go to the next one. So here are our current LCAP goals as prepared and written by our former superintendent with the educational partners that they engaged with. We identified 3 goals: improve conditions of learning, school climate and engagement, promote course access and student success, and improve college and career readiness through the implementation of the district portrait of graduate outcomes, which we're all very proud of. And as Gloria spoke to, we're looking at multiple ways that we can actualize that portrait and really put all of that hard work to play with, regard to student experience and student achievement. Next slide, please. So here's the major changes to note from 6-7 public hearing. We had proposed the potential to create a student support teacher on special assignment and decided that this was not the right time to create that action. So that was eliminated. We initially had the diversity, equity, and inclusion TOSA, which is obviously Anita Sanduina, to help us implement the strategic plan and do some of the great work that Gloria spoke to. But we decided that it was best to fund that through the remaining amount within the educator effectiveness block grant. So we want to utilize our one-time fundings that have the expiration dates most effectively to leverage our supplemental funding, which is the 1.5 million generated through the LCAP related to the 40% unduplicated student population. The state provides us with that funding, and it must be spent on programs and services that serve those students specifically. But we also have our one-time funding as well as our general fund. And so we thought it was most fiscally responsible to move this back into educator effectiveness and then bring transportation, $259,000 back into the LCAP, which was the amount that we budgeted in the LCAP for the student support TOSA, as well as the DEI TOSA. And the transportation amount was sitting as a non-contributing item in the general fund, which means we were using general fund expenditures to pay that part of our bill. And we have a really big transportation bill, and much of the transportation services support students that represent one or more of those unduplicated student categories, which again are low income English language learners and foster and homeless youth. So this allows us to free up that $259,000 within the general fund that we can use towards things like negotiating with teachers next year. Next slide, please. So this is just a breakdown of goal 1, improving conditions of learning, school climate and engagement. And the rationale for this goal was that our special education indicators indicated significant disproportionality in the areas of white students in separate schools, Hispanic students labeled as intellectually disabled, and white students labeled as emotionally disturbed. I'm going to read it on my screen because that's in front. But chronic absenteeism was higher than the county state average, as reflected in year 2 metrics of around 35%. And that's reflecting 21-22 data, which I'll speak to in a little bit as well. Suspension rates were higher than the state average, and our Youth Truth Survey indicates that school engagement was low when compared to other schools. Next slide, please. So here's just a snapshot of the actions for this slide. This is obviously a screenshot taken directly from the LCAP, which show the action, the title, the description, and then the total funds and whether they're contributing or not. If they're contributing, that means that it's supplemental funding used to pay for that expenditure. If they're non-contributing, that means the funding source is something other than the supplemental as allocated by the state for our unduplicated student population. Next slide, please. Here's what we call a screenshot of the crosswalk for goal 1. And there you can clearly see what the goal is, the number of different action items that we have built into this LCAP plan, and the contributing amount, as well as the description of that goal. So if they were crossed out, that means the action was retired. Either it's no longer applicable or the district decided to go in a different direction. Looking at the 3-year plan, when I came in, we realized we have many actions. So one of our plans is to reduce the number of specific actions and make them more overarching in various areas of student supports and programs and staffing. And that's going to be part of our new 3-year process when we rebuild the plan. We also had a lot of incremental dollar amounts allocated throughout the LCAP for different types of professional development that were really hard to execute with regard to substitute shortages, time, space availability to do some of those things. So we've been able to make some shifts and pivots to support our goals in other areas. Next slide, please. Goal 2, promoting course access and student success. So we're looking to continue to improve our English language proficiency rates. Our graduation rate for English learners and students with disabilities has been significantly lower than that for white students. And much like many other districts in the state, as well as the county, SBAC scores in ELA and math were low for Hispanic students, low income students, and students with disabilities. And we're working to improve our A through G rate as well through the goals and actions within this, in this goal. Another screenshot just for eye candy there with what's taken directly from the LCAP. The crosswalk for goal 2, I'll give you a minute to digest that, but you can see where you have contributing dollars from supplemental, the total amount, and then whether it's non-contributing. And when I inherited this LCAP, we weren't utilizing any of the non-contributing funding amounts. It was solely based on the supplemental funding. So our plan, and I'll speak to this a little bit more at the end of the presentation, is to utilize the LCAP as our guiding light and our district strategic plan. So as we build the new 3-year plan, we will see most of the district's expenditures built into the LCAP and defined as contributing or non-contributing, so that it is the strategic plan for the district and not solely focused on supports for unduplicated students, which is how this LCAP was built originally. And many districts do it that way. It's a simplistic way to look at the LCAP, but we are different than this district has been coming into year 3 post-consolidation. We have a new board. We are in the process of developing a vision that's different from what it has been in the past for our district, building on the strategic plan that Gloria presented that's in development right now. We want to bring this all in and utilize the LCAP process as our district strategic plan in an effort to promote student achievement for every kid. Moving on to goal 3, improving college and career readiness through the implementation of the district portrait of a graduate outcomes. Empathy interviews and youth truth data survey shows that college and career readiness and connections to the work world were an area of concern. College and career readiness indicators show only 52% of students were prepared for the work world, and youth truth data also indicated that the career connections and need to make sure that they're relevant for all students. Sorry, I got a computer screen in the way. In addition, the Youth Truth Survey also has questions that relate to several, that made it worse, Jenny.
I was hoping you could see that.
Well, you guys can read. So we're really working on leveraging our portrait of a graduate, those outcomes and how we ensure that students embody through the support systems that we develop within our district and obviously within the LCAP to make sure that they're able to embody those portrait of a graduate outcomes by the time they graduate. Another screenshot of goal 3 actions. You can move on to the next slide, which will be the crosswalk. And that shows you the expenditures, the contributing amounts and non-contributing amounts as well. So not a lot of changes. Again, we included this slide just because we feel that that is going to be really important as we continue to develop our DEI plan as well as our LCAP going into year 3 and then building out that new 3-year plan together with our educational partners. Next slide. So again, next step, once the board adopts this LCAP, we still have to take it to SCO for final approval. Okay. Once SCO approves it, then we'll post it to our website and it'll be official. The board is going to adopt it as written. I do have a few revisions that we need to make, which I'll speak to with regard to the chronic absenteeism. And then I just want to clarify some of the data that's listed, because the way the LCAP works is you pull the most recent data that's available. And you may be aware that the dashboard was shut down for a little while during COVID, so some data points weren't available. So the one thing I want to point out is that the chronic absenteeism rate that's listed at about 35%, is actually from 21-22. Okay.
And that's during COVID, right?
Yes, and that if you then look to the year one column for outcomes, that correlates to the 76.3% attendance rate. So our chronic absenteeism this year was not 35.2%, but that will be updated, and I'll be able to show you the most current data next year in that regard. Attendance rate was a typo from the original development of the draft plan, and we didn't fix that. So we pulled P2 numbers, which are the most recent attendance numbers, and that is now reflected at 90.81. So Karen will make a note of that. I have a note on this, and what I request is that should the board approve this, adopt this LCAP, that I will make that revision in document tracking systems, which is the database in which we build the LCAP before I meet with SCO. And I've already talked to our SCO consultant about this, and she's also going to be the one that approves our LCAP with Jenny Snyder. So we work with Shella Seaton, who is an amazing consultant that works within SCO, former assistant superintendent in many districts, and she's like an LCAP wizard. So she has put together a proposal for us in terms of supporting the district's efforts in building that new 3-year plan that I keep speaking to. And as I work some of the details out, I will bring that to consideration at a future board meeting should we determine we want to contract with this individual to support our process. And I think I'll speak more to it in the August meeting if I'm prepared to bring that contract forward. But we have been, Andrew and I have been engaging closely with Shella, and she's got some really good ideas that align with where we want to take this district. So just kind of going back to those next steps, that's where we are. And so I'm going to leave it to the trustees for any questions.
I just want to ask you to clarify, you said that the year 2 is 21-22, the year 2 outcome?
Or
21-22,
not metrics, yeah. For chronic absenteeism, that reflects 21.
that whole column?
Um,
21-22, or just
Chronic
that?
just chronic absenteeism. The attendance rate is internal data that we calculate. So that's this year's reflected, what I told you at 90.81.
So baseline is 19-20,
Correct.
and then year 1 outcome would be 20-21.
Year 2 reflects some of this year's data, but it's not all current year data. It's you put in the most current data that's available. So it doesn't necessarily reflect 22-23 numbers for all data points.
Because that data is not available.
Because the COVID threw us off with the dashboard.
Okay.
Yeah.
A little more general, but
Yeah.
it's curious to hear you say that you're interested in using the LCAP framework beyond LCAP and to run a bigger portion. But this is what I understand is you're going to run a bigger portion of our budget through the LCAP filter, with some of it turned off as an LCAP actual expense or a source of revenue, but so that we can see the plan. So currently, how much of our budget is LCAP? It's like 1.5 million out of 32 million.
Right.
How much of the budget that would be relevant to these categories could we run through the budget roughly? Well, it's like twice as much, 3 times as much?
Andrew, maybe you'd have.
It's not all. Think of it. No, it can't be everything. It's not facilities, it's
Operational costs, right?
but it's a lot of the things that have to do with DEI stuff.
Yeah,
Really.
absolutely.
So I think it's really interesting to start to bring that, what Gloria spoke about, as into the LCAP framework and look at it not just for at that 1.5 million, which is, I just kind of clarifying that I'm understanding what you're saying.
You are, and
Okay, good. I think
for
it's
instance, the DEI is still written in the LCAP. It's just showing a non-contributing amount.
And you're
because
gonna
we're
do
using
more of
educated
that. We're gonna show more non-contributing amounts so we can see it in that lens.
What are those, what do you call it, the additional support programs that are there besides your compensatory education that we are required to provide?
Yeah.
So what are those things that we're calling them out, showing how they're integrating and supporting, student achievement above and beyond what we're required to do?
That's great. It sounds like a really useful tool for all of us.
Yeah, I
To
figured.
see where and to integrate these different programs so we're not duplicating ourselves. Thank you. Good, thank you.
What I like about that idea is that it also shows the public where we are getting special funds from, but we're doing other things that we could probably afford to have some more special money for.
Yeah.
That we aren't getting. So it's a way to say, this is what we're having to spend general fund dollars for, but could and maybe should be funded in a different manner.
Are there any other questions from board members? Is there any public comment? Would somebody like to move approval of the outcome?
I would love to. I move that we approve the LCAP.
I will second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
Now we will move to the consideration of approval of the 2023 LCAP addendum.
Yeah, so this is a part of the federal Every Student Succeeds Act, and it's something that our district has brought before the board and approved in recent years. I do see a typo in the recommendation, so we'll note that it says 21, 22, so my apologies there. But this is the 22-23 LCAP federal addendum, and it covers the LCAP cycle. And this provides support that's funded by the county for our English language learners, including providing funding for our staff to attend the Multilingual Leadership Conference and all of the other benefits as written in the attached document. So this is a routine item. It doesn't cost the district anything. It's just something that we have to do when taking advantage of this opportunity. Any questions?
Is there any public comment? Is there a motion to approve?
I move that we approve the addendum to the LCAP. I'll second.
All those in favor? Aye. Next, we have on the agenda, consideration of approval of West Sonoma County Consortium Memorandum of Understanding.
So as you know, we are responsible for the West Sonoma County Consortium, and it's a complicated endeavor, but we are the district within the consortium that has the best capacity to support students with disabilities. And so we're really doing a service to our partner districts and the students of the greater West County that have extensive special education needs that can't be met within the different programs at some of our smaller districts. So we have a governing council consisting of a number of superintendents that represent the districts that are part of the consortium. We work with this MOU that describes the services and programs that are overseen and funded through the consortium. The overall revenues that we gain are around 200,000. But it does take a lot of extra work on our part, but we're very proud to support the consortium. And we worked closely with Rose Velasquez and the council members to revise the MOU because the consortium services have evolved. And we wanted to ensure that the services that we were providing were all reflected accurately within the MOU, because it started to get a little bit squirrely where we were saying, well, they need this, so let's do it. And the costs are split up amongst the consortium members. So your build, and Andrew can kind of maybe add to that. Can you help me just summarize that a little bit?
Yeah, so most of the services are, if you're participating, the district is paying for those services. There's different mechanisms in how we determine what the cost share is with the various programs that we do have. So this does not really cost the district any funds to operate outside of, you know, the time in doing it. And then the services that are actually provided is what we pay. We do collect indirect costs on that of, you know, the just $200,000 or so, which really goes back to offset our share to what we have to pay to the consortium. So it's kind of a cost shift, if you will.
So many of the other districts have already brought this before their boards because their meetings were earlier in the month. And I'm bringing this to our board of trustees to approve the MOU as written. And then we will have it all wrapped up for the consortium heading into next year. And we're happy with the MOU. Again, there were some services that weren't written in the MOU. We feel it's really important to have that documented and that it aligns with what's agreed upon. And we work with school and college legal services to ensure that this was all drafted.
Do any trustees have questions for Chris or Andrew? Is there any public comment? Is there a motion to approve the MOU with the West County Consortium?
I move that we approve the contract or MOU with the consortium.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. The next item is the consideration of approval of Elementary and Secondary Education Act Title III Part A English Learner Student Program Consortium for the 22-23 school year.
So this is somewhat linked to the addendum with regard to providing support for English learner student programs. We're a part of a consortium which funds some of the supports that we need. And so this is another routine item. It doesn't cost the district anything. And so I'll leave it to you all if you have any questions.
Are there any questions for Chris? Is there any public comment? Is there a motion for approval of the Elementary and Secondary Education Act Title III Part A English Learner?
I'll move that we approve the MOU. Elementary and Secondary Education Act, Title III, Part A, English Learner Student Program Consortium.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Motion passes. So now we're moving on to Human Resources and consideration of approval of the monthly personnel report. You're presenting this for us?
I am. I'm putting my HR hat back on for one more night. So obviously Mia can't be with us this evening. And so you have your monthly personnel report. Are there any questions on anything that's documented in that report?
Is there any public comment? Is there a motion to approve the monthly personnel report?
So moved.
Second,
Second.
all those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Consideration of approval of employment agreement between West Sonoma County Union High School District and Brenda Hoff for administrative support services.
Yeah, so we are actually really excited that Brenda's agreed to come in and support our new administrative team. And what you have before you this evening is a contract with Brenda. And when we hired our new administrators, two of them have no site experience, right? So Gianna's coming from within, and this will be her first administrative role, although she did serve as a .2 teacher on special assignment as the teacher in charge and gained some value experience there. Chuck has come to us in a different way than many other site administrators, but the site practical experience and some of the knowledge of the operations from the administrative lens we felt it was appropriate to provide support. So what that looks like is you could contract with SCO and they have a list of different retirees that you can choose from. And we had Brenda sitting in our backyard running our expulsion hearings and our SARB board, both of which she chose to step away from this year and is extremely passionate about supporting the district. She's been a vice principal at both Annalee and retired as the principal of Laguna. So she knows our district. She's familiar with some of our administrators, obviously our district team, and she's worked closely with Greg. But we feel that she will be invaluable in supporting our new administrative team, especially with the reduction of one administrator going into this year, as was planned and inevitable in building out our multi-year projections and right-sizing our district. So it's an expensive daily rate, but that's the going rate for retired administrators right now. And so what we have is a not to exceed the 51K and some change amount because of the STRS retirement earnings cap, but we don't foresee us exhausting the entire contract. And Brenda's agreed to come on and support the site staff, office staff, teachers, everybody that an administrator would support for 2 days a week as needed as we move through the fall semester. For the first few months, I anticipate that being regular, and then we'll revisit where we are and see how comfortable the new administrative team is in their new transition roles. And then we can determine how much of Brenda's services we use moving forward. She's not going to be in simply a coaching capacity. She's going to be an acting administrator modeling the skills, techniques, and the operational functions of a site administrator, as well as providing mentorship and institutional knowledge from her experience within the district. Any questions?
I do have a question. So you're not really knowing what the day-to-day tasks of principals are. So Brenda is going to be coming in a couple times a week, and what you just said, she won't just be mentoring, she'll be actually side by side working. What are some of the tasks that she'll be doing, and how is that going to mentor our team? I just would like to see a picture of it in my mind.
So I'll give you an example. So maybe say a student, has a disciplinary situation and it requires a suspension. So she would be able to walk her site admin through support in that regard. Maybe it's how to effectively determine whether a student should be provided an opportunity for a student's study team, and which is what leads to either a 504 or an IEP or any other intervention methods. She may be able to model what it looks like to be the LEA in an IEP, the signature that matters the most for the district in terms of compliance and ensuring that we meet those services is the LEA. So that's really important to first and foremost provide the appropriate supports for the student, but ensure that the district's not in a position of liability. So those are just a few examples. School safety, protocols, how schedules change at the beginning of the year. Brenda's going to be familiar with all of that through the first few weeks of school.
We're also going from 3 vice principals to 2.
Correct.
Yeah. So
It's a piece of that too, yeah. Making sure we don't have things falling through the cracks.
And I think, more so than any other retired administrator could come in and do some of the things that I just spoke to, but she understands, she knows our staff, she knows our district, she knows our community. So, and she's worked closely with our team in her current role as the SARB coordinator and the, expulsion chair for those hearings. And so she's very familiar with the protocols and processes.
I just have to say that we could not be in a better place than to get Brenda. I know when we were on the hiring committee, she was talked about actually as being a support person. And I can't speak highly enough about her. She really is tremendous, and she is 110% behind equity and inclusion, and I think that's going to be a real benefit for us in that respect. And she knows who we are. She just knows who we are, and we could have chosen you know, from a list of who knows what, but not somebody who knows our district. And I think that's a real benefit for us. And for her to say yes is actually a compliment, I think, for us, that she wants to work with us.
Are there any other questions for Chris? Is there any public comment? Is there a motion to approve the contract with?
I'd like to move that we approve the contract for Brenda Hoff for her administrative support services.
Second.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Next item is a consideration of approval of addendum number 1, contract of employment between West Sonoma County Union High School District and Andrew Solis, Chief Business Official.
Yeah, so Andrew is in his second year with the district and he'll be completing that in September. And as you know, the chief business officer is responsible for the overall fiscal stability of the district, obviously working closely with the superintendent and that oversight. But this is a position that has had a tremendous amount of turnover in our district in past years. And I think through my analysis and what I've observed in my first year, I think that's part of the reason we got into some financial stability troubles with regard to deficit spending, working within a structural deficit. So it's an extremely important role, and Andrew has proved more than competent in his CBO role. And so based on a review of comparable salaries for CBOs throughout the region, it's being recommended that effective July 1, 2023, the CBO be advanced on the CBO official salary schedule to step 8. And in the fall, we brought his contract forward to the board to build a 2-year contract for this position. Districts can have 2 executive cabinet members on a more than a 1-year contract. And so trends moving forward to retain CBOs have had the superintendent on a multi-year contract as well as the CBO. So he is on year 1 of that 2-year agreement. The intent was to add a second year for this proposal, and that was an oversight. So we may discuss that in the future years. So really he's going into year 2 of a 2-year agreement. And what we're proposing to the board is that we move him from step 5 to step 8. He's currently on step 4 and would be moving to step 5. So to bring him within a competitive range amongst the other CBO positions around the region, we're recommending that we move him to step 8. And not only are some districts like Petaluma and Sonoma currently going through their CBO search, the number of days that they require their CBO to work are around 223, 225, in addition to a higher salary than what Andrew's based on. And Andrew's contract is 260 days. So you take out the paid holidays and his vacation time, he's still working in that 240 range, which is more days and less salary than some of the other competitive districts in Sonoma County and the local region.
Questions? I have 2 questions. So this is not reflected then in this current budget. That would be a change in the budget if we do that. And so then would that be amended before you send it in if we were to authorize
question
this?
for the CBO.
That'll be amended for first interim.
Okay, it would happen at first interim.
And we did build it out to where he would be at step 5. That is budgeted. So the additional 2 steps would be on top of that.
Okay, and then my second question is, what is the reasoning behind skipping steps rather than adjusting our steps to be more in alignment with other districts?
That is something that we can consider in future years in creating a new line item for the CBO, because it was previously determined that the CBO, the facilities, and the human resources director would all be within the same category. So that is something that we can determine. Most of the other districts that we surveyed, the CBO has their own line item for and a separate salary schedule than other positions within the district. And in every district that we surveyed, the CBO was the #2 highest paid position in the district because of the fiscal oversight and the amount of operations as well as dollars that that person oversees.
Clarifies things. No other questions for Chris? Is there any public comment? Is there a motion?
I move that we approve the addendum to the contract of employment.
I will second.
All those in favor? Aye. Motion passes. The next item is consideration of approval of addendum number 1, contract of employment between West Sonoma County Union High School District and Christopher Meredith, Superintendent.
Right, I will hand out the addendum. That we will discuss.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Right. All right, so some background information. The superintendent is completing the first year of the 3-year employment contract with the West Sonoma County Union High School District. And pursuant to existing terms set forth in section 2 of the contract, the superintendent is entitled to automatically receive a 1.5% salary increase should the annual performance rating be deemed meets expectation or better. In addition to the existing terms set forth in section 2 of the contract, provides that at any time at the board's sole discretion, upon a majority vote of the board, taken at a regular public meeting in accordance with applicable law, the district may increase the superintendent's annual base salary. So existing law requires that any adjustments to the superintendent's compensation must be approved by the governing board in a public open session at a regularly scheduled meeting. So the current considerations is that based on the superintendent's receipt of an overall rating of meets expectations or better on the 22-23 annual performance evaluation, an amendment to the superintendent's employment contract proposed, drafted here in Amendment 1 is handed out, has been prepared and memorialized the contractual mandate of 1.5% increase effective for July 1, 2023. In addition, the proposed contract amended includes draft language to reflect an additional discretionary increase of 6% effective July 1, 2023 for consideration by the board. The cost breakdown to increase would be as follows. The current superintendent base salary schedule is $195,000 with a 1.5% increase with a positive evaluation that increases $2,925. And then the 6% discretionary increase would add $11,875 for a proposed total compensation effective July 1, 2023 of $209,800. So it consists, and we discussed this here in closed session. So the recommendation would be that the Board of Trustees approve the recommendation amendment 1 to the salary contract as proposed. Presented.
Thank you, Andrew. Are there any questions?
Questions or comments?
Questions, and then we can take public comment, then we can have discussion. So clarifying question? Is there any public comment? Yes, can you come to the microphone just because of the.
Is the button green on the top or?
On top, no.
There's a button there to click. Working?
Nope.
Top.
No. Just wanted to clarify, the contract says that all district employees will be receiving a 6% raise. We're aware that certificated is that true for classified as well?
Yes, thank you. Is there any other public comment? And I don't see any hands online. Louis, did you have?
And I just want to say that we had I thought a really thoughtful discussion in closed session around this. And lots of different points of view that were all really intelligent and thoughtful. And I'm in favor of this. And there are many reasons, but one of them is I feel like one of our responsibilities as a board right now is to create stability. It's like we need a year with no chaos. And I think the more we can do to settle things and get back to really what's important in terms of educating kids, the better. So that was a piece of what played into my thinking around this.
Louis, and I'll just say I'm feeling more in favor of this than I originally was. The fact that all of the staff is getting the 6% increase is significant. My concern that I had initially is that somebody at this end of the pay scale, a 6% increase is a lot different than somebody who's maybe making $15 or $30 an hour. And so I had pretty big pause around that. My colleagues here, we had a nice conversation about it, and the moving forward with stability and matching what other districts are offering for similar work is a important factor also. So still thinking about it. I have a few moments.
12 seconds.
12 seconds. Somebody gonna make a motion? Are there any other comments?
I would like to make a motion that we approve the contract with Christopher Meredith, superintendent, with the addendum 1 as shown here.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
And all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Our next item is consideration of approval of the West Sonoma County Union High School District 2023-24 budget and reserve transparency disclosure.
Let me just slide that way.
I'm gonna slide this way. so
Okay.
I can keep that.
Sounds good.
Sorry,
Yep.
finally figured it out, everyone.
So tonight I bring before you the proposed budget as kind of amended, as we had our last public hearing on the 7th. We've approved the LCAP this evening as well, so that is reflected in the budget as presented. So we'll do the second half of approval of LCAP and budget adoption. There we go. So as what drives our budget and our revenue really is the average daily attendance based off of our enrollment. The enrollment projections, as you see there in the top, we're projecting at 1534 for next year, and then we have the continual decline as projected based off of the demographic study that we did back in February. Again, we're hoping that these numbers are going to change with the great work that happened in the spring of the Annalee administration and really bringing the 8th graders on campus, showing them what the programs are really about and that they were excited and that they are going to come and show up. We know that there's been some additional transfer in students that have registered to come to Annalee and the district. So those numbers, we're seeing that trajectory go up. Average daily attendance, even though we are at that 90%, we are projecting that the average daily attendance for our budget is at 91.9%. And you see from the 1534, and this is the total, this is everybody from consortium to our NPS students to students at SCO. Average daily attendance at 1409.72, and then we see that steady decline as enrollment goes down as well. We are funded on a 3-year rolling average with the legislation that changed last year. Instead of where it was current or prior year, whichever was higher, we now have this 3-year rolling average. But within the current 3-year rolling average, we still have some hold harmless ADA that carried over from the COVID times. So as those numbers come out, we still have 2 years within this current year, and next year we'll have 1, and then we'll be back to our traditional average of the 3 years of what we have. So that's where you see that decline happening. If we were funded on current or prior, you'd see where we have that steeper slope in revenue decline than what we're seeing. Right. So here you see our local control funding formula. This is how we are funded. This is the dollars that we are guaranteed by the state. We use the FCMAT, Physical Crisis Assistance Management Team's LCF calculator, which everybody in the state uses to project our revenue based off of our ADA. COLA was funded at the 8.22% for next year, and again funded on the 3-year rolling average. Projected for this year to be almost a 21 million in LCF funded. This does not include the special ed Title I, not Title I, special ed SELPA pass through of about $280,000 that we get. This is just the LCFF calculator. You see, based off of that 8.22% and our average daily attendance, we're going to go up about $500,000, and then the next couple of years we're going to drop in revenue, and that's based off of the COLA projections from the Department of Finance for the out years. Our other incomes, as we talked about at the public hearing, our federal, state, and you see in the italicized there, those are the one-time fundings. That our days of one-time funding, we don't have that this year. They weren't really talking about any one-time funding coming up or anything, so we just kind of have some of those leftovers that were granted either last year or even during COVID, that those funds are expiring and we're starting to use up now within the current program. And then our local fundings through donations, local grants, and such. So as we look and build our assumptions for our expenditures, we go to the next slide.
Can I ask a question about something on this page before, just so we don't have to go back? Yeah. I very briefly skimmed the budget that was approved, and it looked like the arts, music, and instruction block grant was not cut as much as they had anticipated.
Right, so that just came out
like yesterday.
Yeah, so when we get down a little further, there has been a reduction in the reduction.
Yeah.
So so that's good. So the learning recovery emergency block grant was initially proposed to be cut 30%, and now it's being proposed to only be cut 20%. So that's good. The art music block grant was proposed originally at 50% reduction, and now it's only at 5.5%. So
I
that's
really-
been.
I want to say a huge thanks to, I think, a lot of people for pushing with our legislators to tell the governor, no, you can't do that. These were dollars that were so important to our communities, and our voters spoke to that. And just because he can take money doesn't mean he should or will. And I'm glad that he heard that. And I'm glad that there was a way to figure out how to keep that funding. So I was really pleased to hear that.
And it was a shift in funding and trying to fully fund the statutory COLA at 8.22%. So legislature really worked with the governor's office of how can we really continue to fully fund statutory COLA. So that's
for me, it's a perfect example of residents and constituents speaking up to their legislatures and asking their legislatures to do what it is that we need and want them to do. So I really think that so anybody who did write to their legislator about this, thank you.
Yeah, no, and it's really those were appropriated funds from the prior year that he was wanting to cut in the future year. So it was quite the shift of things.
Yeah.
So as we look at the expenditures, staffing is one of the largest expenditures that we have within the district. If we look at where we were from 22-23 second interim to where we're at currently, this was as of 6/19. Our certificated teaching staff, our certificated staff, basically kind of remained the same. Lost about 1 FTE after we reevaluated what are the programs that we needed, what can we fund with other one-time dollars that we have, what are the academic support programs that we need for student achievement. But as we move out into those future years, it's anticipated that we are going to need to reduce 7 FTE over the next 2 out years from the unrestricted general fund. So those would be straight 7 FTE out of the unrestricted general fund. For certificated, we look at certificated admin. We were able to reduce that 1 this year. So that was a savings there, and then that would kind of remain the same through the out years. Classified staff, there was a reduction this year. The reduction from last year to this year is really with vacancies that were just never filled, or kind of right sizing some of the staffing hours of what we needed for like paraeducators are working 8 hours, probably only need to be on campus 7, so we made those reductions in the spring. But due to the LCAP funding and what the current priorities are, we need to reduce those classified staff that are funded within LCAP. And so over the next 2 out years, that's 3.5 FTE. Supervisory classified supervisory staff remain the same. Classified admin, we are adding a classified admin for the wellness coordinator position that is grant funded. So as that grant goes away, so does the position. So we need to reevaluate where all that is. So we'll be back to actually back to a 3 classified admin position. So that's our staffing. We want to understand that. As we continue to look at our other expenditures, one-time costs from last year taken out, our programs mainly do remain within their funding sources, for the exception of special ed and transportation. Transportation is starting to get funded closer to what it is. It's still not fully funded. That's why we have the contribution back in from the LCFF or LCAP funding. Special education, it is what we need to provide for our students who need additional services within realms of special education. It's about right now $3.8 million support from the general fund. Special education is not fully funded.
Never has.
And then back into our mental health funding, the way that funding is coming through again this next year, instead of being pulled into a consortium at the SELPA level, it is now being distributed out per regulation back out to districts. And so we're losing that benefit of that consortium of that $130,000. So that's an increase back to the general fund contribution to support our students. And then actually this year, SELPA did have some extra funding that they had been, I don't want to call it been sitting on, but that they've had in their coffers for a while. And Elizabeth, the executive director for SELPA, she's new this year, and just really looking at what are the services that we need to provide to the districts, what do we have, and pushing out some of those funds back out to the districts. So it's kind of that wash. They have one-time funding of almost $200,000 that, based on our enrollment, we're getting that money back for this next year. With all of that said, we're looking at our multi-year projection, which really looks at our financial stability over the current year and 2 projected years based off of assumptions that we know as of today. So this, what I have here is the combined multi-year projection, which is the unrestricted and restricted general fund revenue dollars, plus the consortium, about $3.2 million. That this is all combined and all that. The full MYP is within the budget packet on page 26 through 28. We see what happens with reduction in revenue, not reduction in enrollment and decrease in average daily attendance. We see that revenue go down over the next couple of years. We are really the expenditures, we're really looking at what do we really have and what is in our control to be able to manage with operations, staffing, everything, making sure that we are right sizing the district to what we really need to operate. So really controlling those expenditures happening. So you see kind of that those are in line. We do see that negative kind of down at the bottom of the change in fund balance, but that is really due to receiving those one-time dollars in prior years, and now we're hitting the checkbook or our bank account now for the dollars that have been sitting. So those expenditures are now coming out. So that's where you see that deficit reduction happening. It's not a structural deficit. If you look at the uncombined general fund expenditure, that has a positive almost $1 million happening. So it's the unrestricted side showing those where revenue is our expenses are exceeding the revenue that's coming in. So that's what's happening. To go to the second half of our multi-year projection, this is really looking at our ending fund balance. And so you see the net changes to that ending fund balance. Again, if you look at page 26 of the full packet, you'll see where the, or 26, 27, 28, you'll see where the uncombined unrestricted revenue is about $1 million change there, where it's positive. So the ending fund balance you see in the green highlighted there is about 9.9 million each year, or close to there, 9.6 in that third year. And then we have, as part of our reserve transparency components of our ending fund balance, we are able to meet our 3% minimum reserve, and that is just a state minimum. I can't stress that enough every time that I talk about it. It does not cover a month of payroll. So if all of our cash went away, all of our expenditures, we don't even have a month of payroll set aside for that. We do have a $9,000 sitting at Exchange Bank for revolving cash. And then the restricted reserve is those funds that come into the district with strings attached. We have to spend it on the certain programs that the state tells us to spend it on, or those that donated, or grants that we receive. So out of that, $9.8 million, almost 3.4 million of it is restricted. And as we move down, we have the LCFF supplemental funds. If we budget everything out correctly and we spend the way that it's supposed to be spent, at the end of this next year, we'll only have $11,000. We know that fluctuates. We won't be able to meet all the PD. We won't be able to do some of the other things that are set aside. So that'll fluctuate as we move through towards the end of next year. We do have textbook reserve set aside for $200,000. We do have lottery funds, restricted lottery funds that are meant to purchase textbooks and that type of instructional materials. We do have a fund balance there. We are purchasing some of the texts that you've already approved. So that's kind of using up that lottery funds before we need to dip into this general fund reserve. Special ed, you see the rising cost of special ed. We need to set aside some money there. And then really at the end of the day, what is really available for any future program or other operational expenses is that $4.8 million of that unappropriated amount in the bottom yellow highlights. So you see whatever carries forward from the unappropriated amount in this end of this current year is what's going to help carry us forward into the future years. So as that changes, so does what's available in our out years. And then we did talk about the changes into the Learning Recovery Emergency Block Grant, initially proposed to be cut from almost 1.4 million cut of 400,000, now it's only about 274,000. And then we almost had $1 million in art music that was awarded to us. That was proposed at 50% cut at almost $500,000. Now 5.5, it's only $54,000. So, that's going to help us a lot. We knew that we had planned to hopefully spend that full amount. So we'll now need to go back and look at how does that impact the multi-year with knowing what that final dollar amount is that needs to be reduced and how they'll take it back. We haven't received all the funds. It's supposed to be apportionments coming out this month. I don't know if they're holding off and waiting to see what they need to adjust. So with that, our next steps here recommend to the Board of Trustees that you adopt the 23-24 budget and we turn that into SCO for their review and their final approval. The state budget is coming along. Here the governor has signed that. I got an email that he did sign. So we'll see, and then final trailer bills as they come out after. So things are looking positive. We're on the right track. We will bring back in September 13th meeting, the unaudited actuals for this current year as to where we finally close the books. And then first interim on December 13th and second interim, I'm hoping on March 13th, depending on how the calendar gets approved for next year. So with that is the budget for next year.
Thank you, Andrew. Does anybody have questions for Andrew?
I have a question.
Can you do?
What would you just, rough numbers, if we can increase enrollment, what's the amount of revenue that we get roughly from one student?
About $12,500. Yeah.
So if we could get 20 more students, we would cover the $275,000 deficit. That's totally doable. This is why we need to stabilize, to have a great inclusive culture, treat our teachers well. We will get 20 more students. Because that's the big variable in this whole budget. I mean, you're doing this amazing job of really parsing all the pieces, but the big variable is that we're depending on this demographic study, which doesn't take into account all the things that are within our control.
And it's getting the students to actually
That's what I was
come
gonna
to
say.
school.
We need their butts in the seat.
Yeah. Enrollment drives, yes, whatever number, 91% or 95%. If we can increase average daily attendance,
Makes it such a
that
difference.
is going to be huge.
Which is also driven by the same thing, though.
Yeah,
The more
absolutely.
people like to go to school and they feel included and the classes are great and there's a good vibe, the more days they're going to be there.
And there's
It's connected.
restrooms available for them.
Yes.
For our next.
And then one thing I want to just say to that, Louis, is that also what we need to keep in mind, kids don't necessarily come all as a grade unit, so they get divided out. So there's different expenses depending on kids. When they come in, if they might require more staff. So then it's not just you get more money because there's more kids here. If it ends up putting a classroom over their maximum, then you have to, but you're right. But then there's also that you should in mind too.
We get 30 kids. We'll do well.
Well, yeah. It's all good. Are there any other questions from the trustees? Is there any public comment? Please, Jim, yes, and microphone.
Oh, green button. Yep.
Okay. Hi.
Thank you.
Kudos, after so many years of just upheaval and all, trying to get the budget steered toward a trend that's stable. The only concern that I have, that the budget that I'm concerned that I've always had, is in the second and the third year, your inflation markers tend to be low. And in the past, there have been, capital assets people and all that who have said, it's okay, use them low because the trends are good. What are they saying now? I mean, your second and third years are fairly conservative in terms of inflation. And if inflation stays where it is or increases, you'll have some problems balancing. But what are the outsiders saying about the potential? Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other public
Thanks for
comment
being here.
from in person? And we don't, nothing online. That's just panelists showing. Oh, no, then it's okay. Okay, good. So with that, do I hear any motion?
I would like to move that we approve the budget for 2023-2024.
Second.
All those in favor?
I'm sorry. Do you want me to repeat it, Jenny? Okay.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Motion passes. And now, consideration of approval of resolution 22 June 2022-23 regarding education protection account.
So the education protection account is part of our LCFF dollars. They come through to us as part of the calculation. And all of those dollars are going to be spent on instructional, the instructional side of the house. It's really all teacher staffing. That's where those dollars get spent. So with that, we're on 3 EPA. Didn't you say 3 EPA?
Yes,
But then we'll go back and do 2.
we skipped 2. Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
We did skip 2. I put a check mark next to it by accident.
I was confused too. I don't know where we were.
That's why I had to look. I'm like, hey, so we'll go back.
We'll go back to 2 after 3. Sorry about that.
So that's saying that
And so
also
that-
to be spent on instruction, which is certificate salaries, teacher salary.
Are there any questions from the trustees for Andrew? Is there any public comment? Is there a motion?
I move that we approve the resolution number 22, June 2022-23 regarding education protection account.
Second.
And this is a resolution, so I'll do roll call vote. Sean?
Aye.
Jeannie?
Aye.
Aye.
Louis? And myself, aye. Motion passes. And now we'll go back to number 2. Consideration of approval of resolution 21, June 22-23, requesting to borrow fund transfer from county treasury for 2023-24.
So this we do annually just as a backup should cash not come in, and we are at 0 cash. Current cash flow shows that will not happen this next year, but we do have funds within our county treasury fund that do show negative cash, not our general fund, but consortium tends to run with negative cash flow, just as we only bill out quarterly basically, and their expenses happen. We are trying to build up that reserve there for them so they have cash on hand. In the meantime, the county does lend that fund 6 cash, and then we just end up paying the negative, whatever negative interest would have been earned back to the county. But overall, the general fund does not have a cash flow issue. So.
Are there any questions for Andrew? Is there any public comment? Is there a motion?
I move that we approve resolution 21.
I'll second.
Okay, roll call vote. Sean?
Aye.
Jeannie?
Aye.
Louis?
Aye.
And myself, aye. Motion passes. And now we'll skip down to 4, which is consideration of approval of 21-22 Measure A Facilities Bond Audit Report.
And with this, I will turn it over to Loretta Castleberry, who's going to be presenting from the CDOC that they met last week. I reviewed the audit, and I'll let her.
She might not know that she's presenting. I just wanted, I asked her to be here tonight to represent the CBOC committee. We met last week. We reviewed the audit, and normally our chair, unfortunately, he couldn't be here tonight. David, unfortunately, wasn't at the meeting, so you couldn't.
Turned out.
Right. So Loretta, normally what we do is just have you give us a brief overview that we've met and,
Is this on?
yes, I think it is.
Well, first of all, I want to thank Jenny for giving us all a very thorough recap of everything that was going on. It was really eye-opening, and we had several new people, right, that had not been there before. So she really needed to go out through all the steps, and everything looked a-okay. We're good.
The audit.
So is that all I have to say?
That is all. We met, they reviewed the audit. We went through the basic expenditure pieces. A big piece that we like to hone in on is you're reviewing prior year expenditures, not current year expenditures. And they did approve the audit for the board to review tonight. That's the CBOC's sole responsibility, is to make sure that all the expenditures of the bond funds are being expended within the bond language. And we also went over all of the exciting projects that we are moving forward with. So that's what Loretta was really excited to hear. Thank you.
And the most exciting is that the auditors presented an unmodified
Yes.
audit, so which is the highest standard that they can present. So all is good.
Thank you,
That's
Andrew.
what I always look for. I turned to the very last page to see if there's any findings. So thank you, findings.
Are there any questions from trustees on this? Is there any public comment? Online? Is there a motion?
I move that we approve the financial audit. Is there a resolution?
No.
No, I move that we approve the facilities bond audit report.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. Next item is.
It's a big one. It's a long one.
I'm
The long
gonna put
one.
my good glasses on, my reading glasses.
You don't gotta read it.
Consideration of approval of resolution 23, June 2022-23, declaring the futility of publicly bidding unforeseen roof and mechanical conditions work at Forestville campus, project AA 37, building C roofing, and approving a change order 006 for that work and change order 005 for credit work.
I really like to have the longest titles for you guys, just to watch you read them.
Run-on sentence.
I always like to make sure that you guys know that when these are written, a lot of times they're written by our legal counsel, and they are the legal requirement that you have to put in that document. I've talked about this item a number of times with you, that we found out through the Building C roofing project that there were a lot of roofs on that roof. And one of our teachers will tell you that looks like a skylight. So during that process, we found that the mechanical ducting was running through that. We assessed it, determined it needed to be replaced. And this is basically the process in which you can approve us change ordering work into the project that exceeds the 10% contingency. So anytime we present a construction project to you, we carry a 10% contingency. We're legally allowed to deal with change orders so that we don't have to stop work. This particular change order exceeds that 10% threshold. Basically, the resolution presented before you and the next item says that we can go over that 10% and not have to go out to bid, because it would otherwise be cost prohibitive and be laborious to the district to have to restart the whole bidding process for this. So this is a legal avenue. We don't always like to take it this way, but we do run into unforeseen conditions in the field, and this is a way for us to manage those. So I'm happy to answer any questions.
Right, so on top of all of that laborious, it would really hold up the work. Right.
Yes, we can't finish the roof. And on this particular project, we can't finish the roof until the mechanical units go in. So we've weatherproofed it. It's buttoned up, for lack of a better word. The mechanical units will be effectively ordered tomorrow when I issue approval of the change order, because I'm really hoping that you guys will approve it. In certain instances, this wasn't pivotal. We are allowed to proceed forward and have you guys ratify a contract. We did not do it this way because this one was relatively expensive.
Are there any questions?
So, I mean, I get it and it makes sense. Sometimes bidding things out is just a waste of money. I'm just curious when you say that it's fair and reasonable price in current market conditions as verified by district staff. What's the process? Do you have a cost estimator? Or do you have a,
Your cost estimator.
all right, so you can look at other bids or other things we've spent.
We look at market trends. We work with our architect, our general contractor, as well as myself. I've been estimating for close to 22 years now, so I know the market trends. I can pretty much predict what things are going to cost based on the average cost of construction, prevailing wage, the price of goods and materials right now, which is astronomical. So we look at bids as they come in and we get multiple bids. So this was not the only bid that we got in. So when you're doing a change order work that's not included in the core of the project, we can bid it out to multiple contractors. So this was the lower of the two.
But I thought this was not bid. I thought that you decided not to bid it because it made sense to.
Our general contractor is allowed because we weren't carrying mechanical on this project and we were change ordering it into a project. So our our general contractor requested multiple bids.
Oh.
We were not.
But you got multiple subcontract prices.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct, absolutely.
So it wasn't just you're using your 20 years of experience, it was you actually got subcontractor bids.
The general contractor
Yeah.
got subcontractor bids. When the district goes, yes, exactly. When the district goes out to bid, we follow a very particular process. Because this work wasn't included and we didn't have a mechanical contractor, we were allowed to go out. If this were like, let's just say the roofing contractor, we'd be beholden to working with that person to verify pricing. And we wouldn't be able to work outside of using them.
Got it. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Are there other questions from trustees? Is there any public comment? Online? Is there a motion?
I move that we declare the futility of publicly bidding unforeseen roof and mechanical conditions and issue a change order.
There's a second.
I'll second.
This is a resolution, so roll call vote. Sean?
Aye.
Jeannie?
Aye.
Louis?
I
And myself, aye. Motion passes. Next, we have the consideration of approval of resolution 24 June 2022-23, declaring the futility of publicly bidding unforeseen painting conditions work at Annalee High School, project AA 34, main building skylight replacement, and approving a change order 001 for that work.
So I'm not going to go into the intricacies of this one. It's the exact same item I presented to you before, except this is a ratification. The painting has already started. Happy to answer questions.
Are there any questions for Jenny? Is there any public comment? Is there a motion?
I move that we approve resolution 24-22, June 22-23, declaring the futility of publicly bidding unforeseen painting conditions at Annalee and approving a change order. And all that other stuff. All the other stuff.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, roll call vote. Sean?
Aye.
Jeannie?
Aye.
Louis?
Aye.
And myself, aye. The motion passes. And our next board meeting is my dog's birthday, your dog's birthday, August 23rd, 2023.
Whoa.
And we also have a DEI committee meeting date, I think in August, she said. Yeah, but it's not the date, and the meeting is adjourned at 7:49.